And the only way to transform that type of practice was to change our operating model.
Thank you.
But it was difficult.
And I think leading those conversations in a room of hierarchies is also a challenge. Claire, can I start with you here? We talked about, when we were talking, preparing for this conversation, the consistency of practice to be, when you are working with children at the center, in multiple service offerings through different funding bodies, the consistency of practice. So could you elaborate on that idea?
So I'm from Victoria. We operate on the lands of the Bunurong people and the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people in beautiful Naarm. And we, like many of you, have to comply with many legislative frameworks and compliance models, and we receive funding from multiple funding bodies to deliver our services. And when I took on the role 4 years ago, I looked at our system and with my colleagues and board realised that we had to do a wholesale review of everything we did from the ground up, because we were compliant, but we weren't good at what we were doing in a lot of ways, because our practice, even though it was, responding to the law, had really embedded and systemic things in it that were actually harming children and harming our clients and resulting in worse outcomes. And it was the practice of the broader system. So things like a rules-based environment that was really punitive and refuge, things like curfews and other things that controlled and punished the women within our system, a framework that didn't correspond with human rights and our requirements to safeguard children and treat them as individuals with their own futures and their own ideas and their own decisions. And we realised that we could do better within the system that we operated in, and we had to start with the system to create change. And so we rebuilt our practice from our strategic plan all the way up into every policy and every procedure to embed human rights and centre every client as an individual. And I know you have a similar framework up here where you have to respond to targets. You have to report on KPIs to secure your funding. We all operate under these service models. But we have a unit-based system, which is about churn. And so one family, we often have women come to our service, they'll have 5, 6, 7 children. There'll be one unit. And a single woman will count as the same. So the child's invisible, in the metrics we report, in the data we report, and in the funding model. And alongside advocating for a better way of counting and understanding what we do, we had to lead the way in actually modelling a system where a child was an individual and at the centre of their own journey. And I think a lot of us would work in spaces where it's really difficult. You might have a child and a safe caregiver, and that safe caregiver's interests might be different to that of the child's. And that's a really impossible tension in specialist family violence services, because we have a responsibility to the family unit, but every single individual within it. And the only way to transform that type of practice was to change our operating model. So things like make sure that every child has their own case manager. So you have a case manager supporting the woman, you look at the family as a unit, you look at kinship and community as a really, really important factor, but the child as an individual gets their own service response and their own say in what they need. And that was a critical change. And it actually meant that we were better at detecting and responding to risks and safety issues, because we were considering every individual's needs within that family unit, as well as the family unit as a whole. And I suppose, as leaders in the room, this is about reflection and accountability and being comfortable to look at your system and recognize when you're not doing so well and shine that light in, because there are always ways we can do better, particularly for children who often don't have a voice in spaces like this.